Hi, I just accidentally hit our producer in the head with my elbow.
Uh-oh, now there's going to be a lawsuit.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm giving him scritches underneath of his chin.
Okay, there we go.
He is
Totally
he's quite
erase what
pink.
just happened.
Yeah, he's purring. He's fine.
He's fine. Okay.
I'm surprised you can't hear him on my microphone. But it's a very light purr. He's not into his heavy
his deep purr.
His machine gun purr. Yeah. He's not. He's just because he's very sleepy. I didn't mean to knock him in the head. I'm sorry, Bobby. Hi, welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Sometimes we record things back to back.
Yeah, maybe. What do you mean? Our outfits are totally different.
Oh yeah. Oh, I wear this old thing. I wear it all the time. Oh my gosh. Okay. So, things that are happening, and we're about to talk about Vincent Price.
Yeah, we had our little intro to Price and Poe last episode, and now we're going to get into the connection piece by piece. We're going to dissect.
And we're doing for the next 3 weeks, just so our audience knows what's going on, is we are going to be comparing, contrasting story, movie. We are covering, yes, the Roger Corman and Vincent Price Poe movies. And our first one for this installment of The Price of Poe is The House of Usher. So with that, I shall usher us in to our intro. I'm so clever.
The sky, it's dark, and the wind is blowing. Come inside. Sit down with a cup of tea while we tell you a little story. A story that lies beyond the oblong box. With your hosts, Levi Leland and Virginia Poe.
All right.
I'm very excited about this episode.
The Fall of the House of Usher.
Or known as the House of Usher. So, fun fact before we get into this episode, with American International Pictures, they often would have ad campaigns for specific areas or specific markets. So, in some places, this was billed as the Fall of the House of Usher, and in other places, it was billed as the House of Usher. So both are correct. Both are correct.
Pick your favorite.
Yeah, and I don't remember where I watched it, but this was my first of the Poe movies that I saw when I was young. I don't remember exactly how old I was. I feel like I may have seen this in the 4th grade as well, shortly after I discovered the stories, because I was clearly obsessed, and I don't remember if my dad rented it from the video store or something like that, or if it was on television. I can't quite remember, but I do remember the television that I watched it on. It was an old tube television that we had in a really fancy cabinet that after we got rid of that television, I used that cabinet because it was a really beautiful piece of furniture. I wish I still had it, that I converted into a kind of like a dresser or an armoire. Yeah, so I have a very clear image of that, because that television cabinet set on the wall that was in between my bedroom and my brother's bedroom. And I remember that. Like, I remember so many things about watching that movie for the first time.
Right. It's so cool because I think sometimes when you reflect back on these instances of
Mm-hmm.
first, discovering, like, you remember more so the environment and some
Mm-hmm.
of the elements that you normally don't recall in life that are
Mm-hmm.
attached to that specific memory that is so core, like
Mm-hmm.
for seeing that movie, or first, like when I got my first complete edition of Poe's works,
Mm-hmm.
I just oddly, and I still have the book, of course, and it still has that smell, but inside the book, it was some kind of cheap glue or something, and it just had that certain smell to it. But I just
Okay.
can't, like, that smell just stuck to my brain. Like, so as I'm reading this book and, I'm remembering reading Poe's tales in their completion for the first time, I'm also
Oh.
remembering the smell of the book and
Mm-hmm.
just those elements that they just stick with you
Mm-hmm.
because, it's a core memory.
Yeah,
So
for
it's
sure.
it's funny that how you're describing that, just the TV and how it was set, because that doesn't really relate to the actual, but it does for
But it
your
does,
memory,
but it
for your
doesn't.
recollection. So it's just, yeah,
Right.
I can relate to that.
Oh. But yeah, so this movie was the first of the Corman Poe movies, and it was released in 1960, 121 years after this story was written. Levi?
Yeah. Yeah, in 1839 it was
Mm-hmm.
published in Burton's Gentleman Burton's Gentleman's Magazine.
Say that 10 times fast.
Yeah. And it was another one of Poe's horror tales. We have an unnamed narrator visiting a friend, Roderick Usher, and pretty much in the story, without giving too much away in case people do want to read it or watch the film or whatever, and we're going to
Mm-hmm.
compare and contrast. But its theme, it's again, we have this female character who turns out to be the twin sister of this Roderick Usher fellow, um, getting entombed alive, as
Mm-hmm.
is the theme in many of Poe's stories. You have the premature burial, and and there's just some really weird elements of this story where the narrator is in this house, of Usher,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just they're after this character Madeline Usher dies, um settling kind of energy, yeah, right.
She
There's
did.
yeah, yes, after she initially dies, quote unquote. um there's just this weird energy that's kind of building up throughout the
Mm-hmm.
story, and you just don't really know what's going on. It's strange. You're kind of on the edge of your seat wondering, like, what is happening with between the narrator and
Mm-hmm.
Roderick Usher and this house is kind of a character in itself in
Yeah.
the story.
Mm-hmm.
um and so we have this build up, and finally it's discovered, kind of spoiling it, but that Madeline
Yeah.
Usher.
Unfortunately, we're gonna have to spoil it, guys. It's 100 and hold on, I can't math.
I always do that to myself. I try to
It's
math on command, and I'm like, ooh, I
it's
should have done that because
almost
I'm
200
terrible.
years. Wait, am I right saying that? No. Man, I don't math. I'm just gonna put it out there, folks. I can't math.
We'll
It's
say,
not my strong suit.
yeah,
If it was written 1839,
150 years
1939,
plus.
yeah. We're approaching 200 years of
If
how
you
old
haven't
this
read it
story
yet,
is.
yeah,
Yeah, so you haven't read it
2039 will
yet,
be 200 years.
still read it. Still read it because it it is a very good story.
It's
It
a good
is
story,
very
very
mysterious.
descriptive. Yes, very descriptive,
Mm-hmm.
very suspenseful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, at the end, after this build up, you discover that um, Madeline Usher was entombed alive. They had after she had died, seemingly, they had put her in the vault down at the bottom of the house because Roderick Usher had this fear that she would be exhumed or used for medical purposes. Her body would be, so they, he wanted to keep her in the vault at the bottom of the house for a couple weeks until they could bury her properly. And so, of course, this narrator, being a friend to Roderick Usher, was just compliant with what he was saying and his wishes. He was just kind of not really asking a lot of questions and just, sure, we'll do that. That's fine. And as they were bringing her body down, the narrator, because of course the narrator is unnamed. We have all these other characters that are named, but in a lot of Poe's stories, his narrators are unnamed. And, whatever, there's a million reasons and, that could be a thing, why literary devices that Poe was using in doing that. Sure. But the narrator notices that Madeline's cheeks are still kind of rosy. So that was kind of a first little hint that Poe is giving, like, she's not really dead. But if you've read any of Poe's other stories, you'll know that he loved premature burial and so you could have assumed. But, after a few weeks and after all this buildup in the story, she the character Usher and the narrator, they're hearing screams and they're hearing just weird things. And she comes back up from the vault and she's very much alive. And she just kind of attacks her brother, who was her twin brother, Roderick Usher. And she just kind of lunges. And this is at the end of the story. And so he dies. He dies. She dies in the altercation. And so the narrator just kind of rides away from the house. And as he turns around, the house, just a huge crack just starts to form and the house just crumbles into bits into the pond. And so the house is then no more. And the narrator just kind of rides away
into the sunset.
Yeah. And it's just after this weird, there was a period a couple years ago where I attended, it was like 3 different Poe events, all different, all very separate things. Because every year, especially around October and,
Sure.
sometimes in January during his birthday, there's
I don't know why they would do this stuff in October.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like there's a flood of events that are Poe related and
it's ridiculous.
But readings and plays or whatever.
It's the best
I don't know what it was this year, but every event I went to, they did the fall of the House of Usher. And I was like, oh my God. Yeah, it was weird.
That's weird.
Very strange.
It must have been in the zeitgeist.
It was something. It was so strange. And it was almost so that it was almost a joke when I attended the next event and they started doing the fall of the House of Usher. And I kind of laughed in my head. I'm like, oh my God, not this story again. It was comical almost because it was just the year of Usher. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But every time I heard the story, I'm trying to gain a different outlook on it. I was trying to focus on different parts. And of course I've read the story myself, probably more than once. And I've heard it even more than that.
Sure.
And I'm just thinking, this is such a weird story. It's such a strange story. I just couldn't put my finger on it. I'm like, I was trying to kind of get inside Poe's head a little bit. I was trying to I don't know, just see what's the symbolism, what's the metaphor to all this. And I was just trying to dissect it. And I was having a hard time. I'm like, this is just an oddball kind of story where, there's just a lot of buildup and suspense and you don't really know what's going to happen, but you kind of do. And, at the end, you just have this big, like I said, altercation and then the characters just die and the narrator just rides away as the whole house just crumbles. And it's wow, that was just so weird. It was so bizarre. So it's one of Poe's more, I don't know, just bizarre stories where you just, I don't know, you're wondering the whole time, what's going on,
It's just something that was happening in that particular world.
Yeah.
And we got to see it through the eyes of the narrator.
Right.
And so this is where the movie is a bit different from the story itself. I mean, of course, we have our butler, in the house, who is an unnamed character. He does have a name in the credits, but no one ever utters his name in the story, like as the movie is playing out. Of course, the story starts off with what would be in the book, in the story, our narrator, but who is this young man, dashing young man, who has come to see his beloved Madeline Usher. This beautiful young woman. He wants to take her back to Boston. So they definitely say that they were in Boston, but she left and he has now returned for her because he loves her and he wants them to be married. And he shows up. Yeah, we are really spoiling all this. In any case,
we kind of have to, I guess.
Yeah, we kind of have to. In any case, he shows up. He meets Mr. Roderick. He's being told that he can't see Madeline because she is very gravely ill, without explanation, but she's just gravely ill. Of course, he does find her. He does get to see her. He convinces her to go back to Boston with him. And she's like, but I can't. I'm very, very ill. And he's like, but you don't look ill. And her brother has convinced. Now, this is the other thing, too, in the movie. I don't recall that it ever being mentioned that they're twins. Does mention that they are brother and sister, but not that they are twins.
Right.
So, of course, there's an altercation. She dies. He's grieving over her. He helps Roderick take her down to the crypt. They put her in. There's this big heavy chain and lock on the casket, and they go back upstairs, and he's just totally distraught, and he's got to see her. Whereas in the story, it takes a while to get to all this. Some time passes.
Yeah.
This all happens in the course of what seems to be at least just one day.
Okay.
All of this transpires within like a day or two. It's definitely not like a week-long journey.
Right.
At all. And yeah, they hear her screaming. They hear her calling. Of course, he tries to get her out. And she does eventually, just like in the story, she does eventually get out of her coffin. And she does. She starts to attack Philip, though, first. And Roderick comes in and steps in. So that's another place where it's very different. And then she, again, kills Roderick. The roof is collapsing. A fire has started in the house, though. And so, of course, he barely makes it out alive. He runs away from the house. He had a horse at the beginning of the movie. We're not sure what happened.
It's one of those things.
Continuity issues.
Right.
So he runs away.
Those happen in movies a lot, though, that you'll find it's kind of like it's convenient in that particular moment or scene, and then they just kind of now it's not convenient, so we'll just forget about it.
Where's your horse?
Right. You're
get out of there faster with a horse. Where'd it go? It was literally right in front of the door. But yeah, so he runs off, and as he runs off, he turns back to see the house is completely consumed in flames, and of course it falls apart and falls down. So a little bit of liberty was taken with this movie, but I think considering some adaptations of of Poe stories that I've seen, this one wasn't too. I enjoyed it. I still loved it just as much as I loved reading the story.
Yeah.
In some ways, I kind of prefer the movie story, if that makes any sense, just because there's more context to it. Like there's a
Right.
purpose for this man coming to the house, as opposed to where in the story we're here, we're like, wait, why did you come? Did he send a message for you? It's all stuff off page that we're not really sure about. So again,
Right.
there's this whole mystery of, wait, why is he here? You know, what is happening in this house? But I did enjoy the story. So some fun facts about this particular story. In the movie, of course, we are seeing this house burning to the ground. Corman actually found there was a old barn not too far from the movie studio where they were filming this that was scheduled to be demolished, and asked for permission to do a controlled fire so that
That's cool.
they could shoot the footage of this burning building specifically for House of Usher.
Okay.
However, it was such an amazing roll of film that Corman actually used it in other projects that he did, specifically Poe films. And a lot of people have noticed, they're like, that's the same burning building from House of Usher. But I mean, when something looks good, kind of want to use it again.
I guess, yeah. And how many buildings do you get to burn down in one lifetime, you know?
So yeah, might as well just use the same footage. It was fantastic.
Right. And we got to think of the technology at the time. Like,
oh yeah.
now it's so easy for production to just,
if they wanted it.
yeah, it's nowadays it's so easy. They can just spit this stuff out in a day. Whereas back then, you know, the technology and just the availability of everything was so limited that, hey, if you had an opportunity to film an old barn burning down, and
you did it.
You did it. And that was gold. So hold on to that. And if you could use it in other projects, great, you know? And yeah, Corman did that so often with the Poe films, you know. He had those calls to the original story, of course, because it's a Poe, you know, those films were based on Poe. So you definitely have those calls to him, the original story. But Corman kind of helped, you know, it's a film, so you have to kind of change things a little bit, you know. It's you,
right.
And I like that Corman did that, where, you know, he gave some of the characters more of a backstory. In some cases, he almost made things make a little bit more sense, you know. And I think that just that's just the difference between a movie and a short story is, you know, Poe was kind of writing for the reader, and the reader was able to kind of put the images and the scenes in their own head from the text, and kind of give these characters a little bit of their own analysis. Whereas a film, it's more straightforward, you know. There's a different approach to a film, you know. The viewer is kind of just absorbing whatever is in the movie, and it goes about that far. So Corman kind of had to add a little bit more, had to give more of a backstory, had to kind of do some of these alterations to Poe's works to make more sense for the viewer, you know.
Well, and to saying with that, if I were to say the name Richard Matheson, what springs to mind? A lot of people don't realize that he wrote a lot of scripts for movies, not just known for his own body of work. I mean, he was very much a fan of Poe himself. For those folks who don't know who Richard Matheson is, you might know a little story called I Am Legend. Or maybe even perhaps another story called A Stir of Echoes. Or how about The Incredible Shrinking Man? Yeah, those are all his stories. So, and oftentimes he did write scripts for, like, screenplays for his own books. But he did, and he worked with Corman a lot. Corman oftentimes didn't even need a rewrite on anything. He said that Matheson's scripts were just that good that he usually went with the first draft.
Wow. It's
and
incredible.
That was definitely the case. Because usually you hear about rewrite after rewrite after rewrite after rewrite, which is sometimes why it takes a while to get some of these projects filmed either for television or for movies, because there's a lot of editing that happens.
Right.
But with Corman, he just loved Matheson's writing so much that he generally did go with that first draft that Matheson would do. They might change things in the moment while filming, but for the most part, it was a one and done kind of deal. So first draft script shot in 15 days. 15 days. Wow.
Yeah. It's insane when you think about it. I mean, yeah.
Well, okay. So also coming to talking about characters from the story. In the story itself, the house is a character. It is a character in the story. Not so much in the movie. We have 4 characters on screen in the entire film. Roderick, Madeline, the narrator of the story, who turns out to be Madeline's beloved, and then the butler. And that's it. Like, you've got 4 people, and very rarely in the movie are all 4 in the same room at the same time. So that filming could have gone very quickly with such a small cast.
Right.
Not a lot of people having to do sides and going back and recutting this, that, and the other. With Price, his preparation for this movie, he actually shaved his mustache, which is probably the one thing that, well, not the one thing, but one of the many things about him that people could probably like spit out right away when they say, what do you think of when you think of Vincent Price?
Yeah.
Probably his laugh and his voice is like the first thing you think of. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing that most people would say would probably either be his mustache or Poe.
Yeah.
So it's a tie. It's a very close tie. But he did. He had his hair dyed blonde. He shaved his mustache, and he went on a special diet before the movie began filming to drop some weight so that his already 6'4" frame would look even more sickly, almost like a walking skeleton himself. And he also stayed out of the sunlight as much as possible for months before filming the movie, because again, he wanted to appear as sickly as possible.
Wow.
Which is such a vast, which is such a vast contrast in the movie to Madeline, because Madeline has these beautiful rosy cheeks. She has this look of life to her, but yet she keeps talking about how she's dying. And you're like,
right.
Nah, your bro looks like he's dying.
Your bro.
But you look fine.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like people really get into it. It did not take Price very much convincing to do these movies with Roger Corman, because he himself, as we stated in our previous episode, very big fan of Poe. He loved Poe. And he was paid quite a bit of money to do these movies. However, he didn't really care about how much he made. And he stated that before. He's like, I don't care whether I get paid or not. He said the opportunity to bring these characters of Poe's to life, he saw that as a challenge and he wanted to go for it. And I mean,
right.
What more can you say? I mean, that in and of itself is just amazing. To know that someone's that excited to do a project, not because of what they're getting paid or not getting paid, but because of the property, because of the the content because of the subject matter, you know, and he was very excited about that. Some other fun facts from the movie that most people probably don't know. I don't remember the artist's name, and I was trying to find that before we did this episode, and I just couldn't find it. But in the movie, there are paintings of the other family members that they point out during.
Right.
Those paintings at the end of filming all went home with various cast members and crew members. And Corman actually took the painting that was done of Roderick Usher. So he has the painting of Vincent, where he, you know, he took that home with him after that filming was complete. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is very cool.
Yeah. And then also too, talking about the addition of backstory and building and, you know, explanation. That's another thing in the movie that is not true to the story itself, is the fact that there's this whole backstory of family and ancestry and lineage that we just don't have in the original story that Eddie wrote. So it was kind of like, that was, even when I was young, that was a big thing that I noticed, because shortly after I saw that movie, that was when I read the story. So I saw the movie first as a kid, then I went and got the story and I read that, and I was like, oh, that's weird, you know. So of course, you know, my 8-year-old brain, 9-year-old brain's going, that's different. Why is that different? That doesn't make sense, you know. So it's kind of my first like real introduction to where the movie and book do not meet.
Right.
You know?
Right. Still a common theme today, even when they do a movie version of a book.
Some things just have to get changed.
Yes.
Some things have to get changed because some things are not as dramatic. Some things are not as wow and sensational as other things are. Although I do prefer certain ways that things happen in comic books. I forgive you, Neil. Just saying. Some people won't understand what that means. Poor Gregory. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. Poe. This is not a Sandman podcast. This is a Poe podcast. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, so this was kind of a pretty big deal production. To do something this, you know, scale as Corman's first with this particular American International studio, because he was supposed to film 2 smaller, not even movies, really, like shorts or something.
Like
and he kind of presented this in a way to the studio that they were like, all right, go ahead, do it. Let's see what you got. And they did. They absolutely did. It was pretty crazy how well received it was. How absolutely well received it was. So this was filmed, like I said, 15 days. The score composed in 1 day. Can you believe that?
That's just incredible.
The entire score for the movie was composed in 1 day.
It's unbelievable.
I can't even fathom that at all. But there you go. It did make its first showing was in England. That happened for Trade and Press in October of 1960. It had such a great reception that they actually had a special screening for press and horror movie fans on October 31st, 1960. How apropos.
Yeah.
So, of course, I believe it was in December that it was released more publicly. And in some places, they didn't get it until 1961, 1962. Some places like Spain didn't even see a release of it until 1983.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really interesting. Most people probably can't fathom that because we're in the 21st century. And there's our taskmaster.
I know, right? I was just going to say.
Shoot.
Clock is just another producer.
The clock has just said what time it is. Okay. But you know, most people nowadays, and especially younger generations, could probably not even fathom the fact that, you know, you get a movie, this is the release date, it's automatically on some streaming service somewhere for you to see. Or it comes out in a couple of weeks on the streaming after it's been in the theater for a couple of weeks. But back then, I mean, I know, so this is going to date me. My first movie was Star Wars in 1977, but it was much later in the year. Yeah, because that's when it got to us.
Right.
Yeah. So like it's crazy about how like certain and also too with certain demographics and certain areas, they would get the movie first before smaller, less metropolitan places would.
Right.
So some people would, like, a movie would come out and they may not get the opportunity to see it because while transport and traveling was much more prevalent during the early 20th century than, let's say, in the 19th century, just because of, you know, trains and airplanes and, more easily accessible travel happened. When movies were first, being shown, people didn't travel out to big cities as much. Like,
right.
People tended to stay in their own area, or they would go to the next local big city or, something like that. But it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go to DC for the day.
Right.
That was like something you planned out,
right.
Something you planned out. So some people didn't get to see films until far after they were originally released. And same in the case as we see with House of Usher. But there we go. House of Usher.
Hopefully people are encouraged to either read the story or watch the movie or do both.
Or both.
And yeah, if you do, let us know what you think.
Next week, I'm just going to go ahead and tell them which one we're covering. Next week, we are going to be doing The Tomb of Lygia.
Another great one.
I love this story so much.
Yeah.
I can't wait to talk about it to everybody. It's just fantastic. So before we go, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sticking with us. Thank you to everyone who's been sharing our video links and our audio links. And thank everyone for sticking around with us and putting up with our little antics and our goofiness. And we appreciate all of you so very, very much. And special shout out to our patron. We have a black cat.
Ooh.
Are you ready to hear who our patron is?
Oh, I'm ready.
The name came up Enrique Abu.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Enrique.
Which I was like, is someone joshing
Get a shout out.
Someone's joshing me.
We'll take it.
Yeah, whatever. Like, it could be him, may not be, but hey, thanks for supporting us. We appreciate you. And for anybody coming up to the Telltale Steampunk Festival, April 1st and 2nd, we'll be there. Our fellow Poecasters with 6 Degrees of Edgar Allan Poe will be there. And we're going to be doing a live audience recording at 4:30 on the 1st, from 4:30 to 5:30 in the main ballroom. Come see us there. We're going to be out and about, hanging around. And until
Cool.
next time,
All right.
everybody knows which story we're covering next. So if you get a chance to read it or watch
Yeah,
the
you
movie
can
before
study.
you got your
Can
homework,
prepare.
you can study.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
There'll be a quiz at the end. I hate quizzes.
Ugh.
Okay. No more torture. All right.
Thank God those days are over.
I know. Levi, thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, Virginia. This was fun. And I'm excited for the next one, as always.
All right. As always, take
We'll
care.
see you
everybody.
then. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Beyond the Oblong Box with your hosts, Levi Leland and Virginia Poe. This program is produced by EG&L Brothers Limited with production assistance by Peter D. Come Rest in This Bosom, arranged and performed by the Ninth Heaven. You can find us online on Facebook at BTOB Podcast, on Instagram at Beyond the Oblong Box, or reach us by email btob1847@gmail.com. If you'd like to help our show grow, consider becoming a patron by visiting patreon.com/Beyond the Oblong Box Podcast. You can also subscribe, rate, or review the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of your preferred podcast platforms.